this just like really makes sense to me. And I was like looking around my apartment and I was like, I have a lot of stuff and it never felt like, it always felt like I had to keep collecting to be the cool person. Like I had to have this and I had to have this to be the cool person. And like back then also, social media was still quite new. You know, people hadn't quite, I guess there was people out there making money from it, but it was still really new and people were finding their way around things like Instagram and Facebook and that sort of thing. But yeah, minimalism sort of started it and then it sort of rolled into sort of zero waste and then like having less, like having less clothing, I guess, and then like veganism and vegetarianism. And I started talking about it. And people, I sort of found these communities online and people were talking about it as well. And people spoke back to me about slow fashion. They're like, well, have you heard of this person doing cool things? I'm like, no, I follow them. So I guess it just grew organically from that, my passion from it.
I mean, we all have a moment in our life when we get the spark that you talked about in the beginning, that, when it made us think that there is something that we should know, or it has to be that way.
I think from the minimalist documentary, it was like how they were sort of talking about how we're always consuming. And because social media was just starting, you were starting to see inside people's houses, or they were showing you what they bought, or like their collections of things. So you're like, oh, I should have that as well, you know? So I think it was their message of like overall owning less and like you actually don't really need that much. That really resonated with me and made me sort of think like, I'd moved from one state to the next and I dragged all this stuff with me and I didn't even know what I had dragged with me. I think that was the main thing that just started it all, to be honest. Like, to be a little bit graphic, we were a family of 5 that kind of lived in the middle of nowhere. To be a little graphic, we did like, slaughter sheep at our property to feed our family because that was the done thing back then. So I guess that was a sustainable way, like, we were sourcing our own meat. Yeah, my mum used to make our clothing, so she's a really good seamstress and she'd make little matching outfits for myself and my sisters. But they were just usually very small things like making clothing, making your own meat sort of thing. I mean, the first ever post I put on Instagram was a half-eaten chocolate rabbit. So it must have been around Easter. Maybe like going op shopping and showing what I bought. So yeah, I guess my content creation didn't really start until sort of reels started kicking in a bit and then we get a bit more creative. But I think it was just really simple, like flat lays, I guess was the start. But yeah, so when I first started, I was working in fast fashion. So I was working at Cotton On and I was just thought like, it'd be fun to be a stylist. So I did a bit of research and I was like, if I've got the opportunity to do it now, why don't I try? I quite enjoy getting that sort of picture in my head and creating the outfits and like, working with a photographer and a makeup artist and a hairstylist and finding the location and creating that look. But it was also around that time that I was discovering slow fashion. So I think they went hand in hand because that's when I started talking about fashion, but also talking about slow fashion. There's a lot of greenwashing and a lot of misinformation out there. Like, sometimes I come across posts and they have no source of what they're like, they're claiming a fact, but there's no source, or the source is like, 30 years old. Like, even the reliable source that I used to use in my presentations of, I think it was 7,000 tons of clothing goes to landfill every 10 seconds or whatever. So like, it's misinformation and greenwashing is so big out there.
And I think the brands should be more transparent about where they're sourcing, about the material, if they claim to be sustainable. And I think sustainability is the only way right now to live for the fashion brands.
It's hard to overcome as a consumer as well, or as someone who's interested in fashion, because you can't really just take a peek at what the brand is doing and see what they're producing or where they're getting their stuff from, because sometimes it's so closely guarded and hidden, and their sustainability reports or whatever report can sometimes take, like, it's very hard to read them sometimes if you don't know what you're looking for. So unfortunately, you have to sort of train yourself to see through greenwashing, which can be difficult at times and tiring at times. So I think we just all need to, when we see a quote or when we see something saying they're sustainable, we just need to second guess it and do more research. My view of the secondhand industry is like I work in a consignment style store at the moment. So we buy and sell clothing on like a buy sell trade model. So if you bring in clothing and we like it, we pop a price on it and make you an offer of cash or store credit. But I do think there's no way you can capture every single every single piece of clothing that's made in the world. Like you can't capture in the secondhand model because the person uses it and they might throw it out, or they don't know where to dispose of it, so they just throw it out, or they dump it outside a op shop and then it gets thrown into the bin, or they break it and it goes to the bin.